From now as I'm off, I'm going to stay home, not going out, no alcohol.
Some of them, they're living in the shack, and the shacks are hot now. They have to go outside.
When we touch this bahole, and some of us, we do not know they have coronavirus or not.
At home, I try all my best to keep my kids in the house, wash the hands, sanitize all the time. But sometimes there are certain things that force you to go out.
Well, with that, it's good evening and welcome to Unfiltered on SABC 3 and Channel 404 this evening. I'm Desiree Chauke, fresh out of that address by President Cyril Ramaphosa, giving an update on the number of COVID-19 deaths. 3 South Africans have now succumbed to the outbreak. The president also making that announcement that government will be increasing the size of current efforts at an unprecedented scale, and also reiterating the protocols to be followed by South African citizens if you display symptoms. We're in conversation this evening with the Minister of Human Settlements, Water and Sanitation, Minister Lindiwe Sisulu, about her department and how it will be impacted by these announcements, but also talking to her about the resettlement of people in densely populated informal settlements and water security measures she announced at the weekend. Tonight on Unfiltered, we explore these and many other questions relating to the struggle to social distance, which is, of course, vital if we are to conquer this deadly virus versus South Africa's pre-existing and socio-economic challenges. For this, we'll chat to either by telephonically or via Skype to clinical psychologist Desi Zoneva, also Nomza Muzondo, who is the Executive Director of the Socio-Economic Rights Institute, SIRI, as well as social commentator Maxwell Masuku. We'll welcome the Human Settlements Minister in a bit. But you're welcome to join us on social media tonight using our hashtags at SABC News Online and SABC News Unfiltered. Our social media question tonight: how are you managing and coping with the national lockdown? Let's bring in the minister now. Minister Sisulu, a very good evening to you. Thanks for joining us this evening.
My pleasure, Desiree.
How is your department impacted by the announcement the President made this evening?
It gives us time to do what needs to be done. So we are relieved that we have more time. We have to ensure that we provide all the necessary essentials like water, necessary ablution, and alternative arrangements for accommodation if that is necessary.
National Treasury also announcing tonight that it will be relaxing some legal requirements for municipalities in terms of the amount of turnaround time for decisions in relation to service delivery. Are you part of this?
We are part of it because we do. I mean, one thing that is not clear to our people is that I, as Minister of Water, am responsible for water security in the country. But for the water to get to people's taps is the responsibility of the municipalities. So quite often when they run dry and they don't have water in their taps, they call the minister. They think it has to do with the Minister of Water Affairs. But we actually work through the municipalities. Constitutionally, it is the responsibility of municipalities to articulate water to people's taps. So the relaxation of the rules for municipalities helps us a great deal, and we work jointly with them in everything we do.
Minister, your department deals directly with the issues that are related to the COVID-19 outbreak, the human settlements, the water and sanitation. Let's just deal separately for now with the settlement issue. The government has identified 17 parcels of land for resettlement purposes for people who stay in informal settlements should they need this, and also that you've identified 29 densely populated areas with a high propensity for infections with this outbreak. Tell us about these parcels of land and how you hope to roll out this process.
Desiree, can I start off with something that I want you and I to correct? When we had a press conference a few days ago, I'm not so sure now, time is just like...
on Saturday.
On Saturday, yes. I indicated that we would like to work with those organizations that work very closely with people who live in informal settlements so that we can together find out what can be done. Because in the past, we have had a situation where people in informal settlements have been very resistant to being moved. I indicated that we have to persuade them that they have to move at some point because the conditions under which they live makes it very difficult for us to provide them with the kind of support that we would like to provide them with. And I indicated that we clean the city, the main cities of streets of Johannesburg and Cape Town. We use these tankers, the big tankers that disinfect. We would not be able to do that in informal settlements. So we would not be able to provide them with a level of cleanliness because they are inaccessible as they are now. So we would need to find a way in which we create streets so that when there is somebody who is unwell, we are also able to call an ambulance. Unfortunately, SABC completely misrepresented that statement and said that we can't get into informal settlements because they are inaccessible. That is untrue. And I'd like you, please, that we correct that. Our major priority is the informal settlements because they live already in disadvantaged situations.
Noted, Minister, and clarification made. Let's just go into the process of rolling out this access to informal settlements. How do you hope to go about it?
Well, we can't prescribe to those people. What we're doing is we're using these 29 parcels of land and providing the necessary accommodation, so that should they be persuaded, it would be easy for us to be able to assist them, especially the elderly and those people with very young children, to take them to those areas which would not be very far. We've identified them in areas adjacent to the informal settlement. So it will be within the same geographic area. And we are building up, starting from tomorrow, we will be building up there. And we hope that we can finish in 2 weeks or so, building up those locations alongside informal settlements. And we would like a mediator, such as I've indicated, those organizations that have been dealing with informal settlement, the people in informal settlement, because they would be able to reach out to them easier than we as government would be able to reach out to them. And we're hoping that in less than a month we would have been able to take some people out of informal settlements and put them in areas where it is possible. Should they be required to be quarantined, they would be self-quarantined. Should they require any medication, we would be able to take our mobile clinics there to assist them there.
Are there...
I'm talking about three weeks to a month, we should be able to have all of these things in place.
So all these activities will go well beyond the 21-day lockdown period?
Yes, they will go well. In fact, these activities will go on for as long as we have the crisis on our hands.
Yeah.
This is just the beginning, and the beginning has to take into consideration everybody who needs our help. And we are particularly wanting to extend our hand to those people who live in disadvantaged conditions.
Minister Sisulu, are there any groupings who are already being moved?
We are already moving people, and those are people who would have been classified as homeless people. And we're working together with the Minister of Social Development in that, and together with the Minister of Public Works. And some buildings have been identified, and we're in the process of moving those people into those buildings. And we've had a lot of resistance from them because they don't want to be confined. But we are talking to social workers to make sure that we can get maximum cooperation. But we started with the people who are termed homeless people.
Minister, let's move now to the issue of water security. You also made several announcements announcements at the weekend in this regard, the provision of JoJo tanks that you were talking about, but a lot of questions being raised about the practicality of this project.
Yes. Well, I haven't had any questions about the practicality of the project, but I can tell you it is a firebrand of a success. We have managed, together with the support of the Rotary chair of those people who manufacture those tanks, been able to secure 400,000 tanks, over and above the tanks that we had already bought, and over and above the tanks that that particular organization, AMPA, is providing us. We have tanks to fill up the whole country. And these we have identified will go to certain areas in certain provinces. And already in the Eastern Cape, we've delivered 834 tanks. In the Free State, we've delivered 344, and in Gauteng, we've delivered 370. That was off on Saturday. Today, they've probably doubled. But we have all the tanks we need. We also have buckets for the elderly, and we have people who will be delivering these buckets to the elderly on a regular basis. We will have people who will be looking after the JoJo tanks to make sure that it is constantly filled with water. We have a whole plan to suit every occasion that we encounter, and we have no doubt that we will succeed in this one, on the water one.
The process of filling up the tanks with water pre the outbreak, South Africa having that huge conversation about water shortage. Where will the water be coming from?
We are now going to be using alternative technologies that provide us with water. There are technologies and innovations that provide us with water, and we will be rolling those out. They have been registered with our Water Research Council. One of them is found, I think, largely in Limpopo because of the low cloud. It is fog, harvesting water from fog and atmospheric harvesting of water. That we've had a good yield out of that innovation, and we would like to use it in those areas where the environment allows for us to abstract water from the atmosphere. We also have technologies that abstract water from the sand, and we've had good yield from that. And those are some of the innovations that we have been using, together with boreholes, drilling to get water. So we have enough technologies in this country to have additional water to what we have.
Can you give us an indication of the providers of all of these systems, the value chain? Is it in place, and will we see them hitting the ground running?
They are already in place, and we've been using them during the drought. So all we're doing is extending their scope and making sure we cover greater in more areas than we've been covering. When the drought came, it was a bit of a disaster because we were not anticipating it, and we had to scramble to find all of these things. But now looking back, we realize that it has done us well, because we are now in a state of preparedness. We are now able to roll out water to every part of the country that doesn't have water. We have everything in place.
Minister, digressing a bit, because I know we're dealing with a national emergency, the president saying himself, uncharted territory. We've never experienced a situation like this before. But listening to you list those activities that are currently in place, it begs that question that some people have been asking, that if the government is able to respond in this way, it makes one question why these activities have not been able to be implemented previously when there was clearly a need still.
Well, it is almost like saying, but why do you bring a child to the clinic? You take a child to the clinic because the child is not well. Otherwise, we were providing water to in a situation that we were able to progressively. now, when we're faced with a crisis, number one, we are able to get the to deregulate the stringent regulations around which government normally works, and we need a special dispensation to do that. When we had drought, for instance, we had a special dispensation to go all out to provide water. So we were not working as a normal system would work. So the reason why we're able to upscale is because we are now working under different conditions, and the Constitution allows us to, bypass some of the regulations and put in place regulations that deal with that particular crisis. A crisis in itself does provide solutions because you are able to see what in the regulations works as in the normal course of events and what doesn't. And right now we're working in emergency situations. So it is not possible for me to indicate why it will. It would be. I can't explain what you're wanting me to explain, except that we are now in a crisis. Because we're in a crisis, we've had to go outside of the regulations that we have. We've had to get more money than we have because we're facing a crisis. It's not a normal time. Under normal times, we would be dealing with a normal situation. Abnormal times require abnormal situations, and this is what we're doing. We're providing abnormal solutions to this abnormal time.
Absolutely. You're watching Unfiltered. We're in conversation with the Minister of Human Settlements, Water and Sanitation, Minister Lindiwe Sisulu. We're going to take a short break. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.
They are concerned about the virus. They are concerned about their livelihoods. They are concerned about the loneliness that this is going to impose on them as we confine them to their homes. They are concerned about boredom. They will be looking up to you to give them confidence that everything will be all right. They will be looking upon you not as a force of might, but as a force of kindness.
That's President Cyril Ramaphosa, of course, as the Commander-in-Chief of the Army, addressing the Army last week. But in his address once again tonight, making a pointed appeal to the security personnel to remind them that your role in this process is to support, reassure, and comfort our people and act within the law as you're dealing with communities in this process. Let's continue with our conversation. We still have the Minister of Human Settlements, Water and Sanitation on the line, but we're going to bring into the conversation Nomzamo Zondo, who is the Executive Director of the Socio-Economic Rights Institute. Siri, Nomzamo, a very good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Good evening, Desiree. Thank you for having me.
The President this evening, in outlining the upscaling of efforts by government to stem coronavirus, reminding South Africans about the protocols, saying that people who are infected but have moderate symptoms must stay at home. People who have severe symptoms will be transferred to hospitals, and people with light, that kind of sums it up. What are your thoughts about the President's address this evening?
Sure. I think there's a few things that are on my mind. I think one of the main challenges that we've seen is the fact that, unfortunately, as a country, we were not prepared for something like the coronavirus, where people who live in informal settlements whose levels of service, even at the bare minimum, we have not met. So when we say 5 households must share a temporary toilet, we're not meeting that standard. So how do you make sure that people are able to stay at home? First of all, as we've seen, the fight with the police and the army is about people staying behind closed doors. But we know millions of people in this country live in the situations where they can't stay indoors because their access to services is outdoors. People fetch their water more than 200 meters away from their homes. But what's been most concerning for us is the issue of the response to the police and brutality that we've seen from the police and the army. And in fact, we want to request that the president must actually make sure that there is a dashboard which records every incident of police brutality, which also ensures that each incident is accounted for and that someone provides an explanation to at least make the army aware that someone is watching them, that someone does expect them to comply with people's rights and to comply with the Constitution.
We're also in conversation tonight with the Minister of Human Settlements, Water and Sanitation, Minister Lindiwe Sisulu. I don't know to what extent you've been listening to our conversation. Your thoughts about what the Minister had to say?
Do you want me to Ezra, are you speaking to me or are you speaking to...
To you, Nomzamo.
So, I mean, I've been following some of the minister's statements around informal settlements. I think all of us who are in civil society have been quite excited about the response of government in trying to make sure that people have access to basic services. We have been worried about the slow response to bring civil society and activists in these communities into the fold. We understand that the problem is humongous, and government on its own cannot do it without the collaboration and the help of civil society. But unfortunately, all the people who can ensure that people in informal settlements have access to basic services are all locked down at home.
Minister Sisulu has made an invitation, a call to organizations such as yours. Are you interacting with the department? In which way, if you are?
We have been invited to a conversation with the Department of Human Settlements, and we respect, again, the spirit that those engagements have been started. And it has been around the issue of informal settlements and how do we make sure that in trying to address the virus, we respect people's rights and we make sure that the community's voices are respected.
Of course, we've also asked our viewers to take part in this conversation tonight. And let's take a look at some of the Twitter, or is it Twitter or Facebook, comments that have come through this evening. Let's take a look at those. Sonwabile Spaidile saying, I am so bored being in the house for 4 days. It's no child's play, but ultimately this is for my own good at the end, and I'm doing it for my own safety. I suppose that is the point, Sonwabile. Thank you so much for that contribution. SB Mdagan is saying, so far everything's going well. We don't have a choice. We have to help fight COVID-19. Penguin saying, so far so good, but it's still a long hike to the end post. Maybe don't ask that question on day 19 as Twitter may catch fire from the responses. Mart X Mhlanga saying, my legs are craving a run, but I've decided that I won't do a single scribble during the lockdown. It's quite encouraging to see how South Africans are responding to this call to stay at home and self-distance. But Nomzamo, let's bring you back in again. You were talking earlier about people who, situations where you have 5 family members in one shack. How practical is social distancing in this instance?
Look, I think that the main difficulty is, as you point out, the issue of space, but also the issue of services that people have access to. Another issue that I think might have come up in the earlier conversation is the issue of food security. As we've seen, some of the employers of people who are in the informal market, even people who are formally employed, like your taxi drivers and domestic workers, not being ensured of an income during this time. So people are grappling with many things outside just simply, I can be inside these 4 walls. They're also trying to see, how do I survive 21 days in these 4 walls?
Minister Sisulu, to wrap up this part of the show, let's just bring you back in again. I know we were only going to have you for 30 minutes. What would you like to say to South Africans watching right now, especially the vulnerable ones who are looking on seeking answers in terms of practical steps where they can go if they seek assistance from government beyond the civil society and civic society?
Okay, I would like to thank Nomzamo for her commitment to work with us, and I hope that many more other organizations like hers will come on board, because we really need them to reach out to our people to explain why we would need to do what we are hoping will be acceptable to them. And I'm also encouraged by the tweets that you read out, because South Africans seem to be accepting the fact that we have to be responsible to be able to get out of this. What are we doing? We have very little sleep. What we've been able to achieve in the short space of time that we've been under this environment, this new environment, has actually been remarkable. And most of us are really walking dead. But we would like to encourage our people to understand, we really care. And if there's been any police brutality or brutality from our soldiers, please report it. And we're terribly sorry. I think that they're just acting out of frustration because they feel that South Africans don't understand the dire need that the dire situation that we're in. And perhaps we just overreacted. But we are dealing with that. We are counseling them. We are informed about their, heavy handling. And I'm hoping that in time they will, be normal. Beyond that, I'm extremely encouraged by this discussion, because it seems that we are all understanding that we are in a very, very difficult situation. The only way that we're going to get out of it is to work together, and we're doing our best to do just that.
Minister Sisulu, I've just been informed by our producers that you actually acceded to staying with us for the duration of the show. Thank you very much for that. But let's just bring now into the conversation Desi Tsaneva. You're a clinical psychologist. Desi, thank you so much for the time. That announcement by the President this evening, I don't know if you were listening to that address, specifically to South Africans, saying that, giving the different categories of people and how they should, the protocols of approaching the health systems in terms of people who are displaying symptoms or people who are infected but have moderate symptoms, and those people who have severe symptoms. From a clinical psychological point of view, what would you say to South Africans at this time?
It's very important that we remain as calm as we can and deal with whatever is facing us in this moment. It's so easy for our minds to run away with us, to make us think about what if, to try and plan and see how we're going to cope in the future. But at this moment, we need to just take it step by step, listen to the guidance by the President, learn about the steps we need to take from the WHO, the CDC, the NICD, protect ourselves with those steps, and practice techniques to calm ourselves when anxiety gets too bad, when boredom gets too bad, to stay connected as much as we can. So distance ourselves physically, but not socially.
So you talking about remaining calm, which majorly South Africans have really been able to do. But there's also that worry with being in confined spaces for too long. How should people be dealing with this?
It needs to be a routine that we try to keep. So try to have things that you do, whether it's reading, whether it's exercising, whether you set some kind of purpose to your days. Just sitting, lying on a bed or just watching TV the whole day will make you feel worse. So even if you're doing squats, if you're doing jumping jacks, if you are trying to learn something or setting up phone calls with loved ones or chatting with loved ones, have a purpose to this time so that you don't find that you are just lying there constantly thinking about the state we're in and how we can do nothing about it in this moment.
As part of the health provision system, those people who are still operational at this moment, have you dealt with any people who've been impacted by this time locked away?
Some people have been impacted in different ways by this virus. Some going for testing, some in quarantine, and people are struggling. They're struggling with the amount of days that they're spending at home. They're struggling with fears around infecting others if they don't know, or if they had traveled, or if they had been in touch with somebody. They're struggling with the feeling of being locked in. Even just psychologically, the first day, knowing that you can't go out even if you want to, it's a really restrictive thing. So there's so much psychological impact from this. And then obviously survival fears around finances, around food, around our health, around our loved ones.
so much.
Well, thank you so much for speaking to us this evening. Clinical psychologist Desi Tsoneva, thanks for your time. You're watching Unfiltered. Let's take a break.
It's unfortunate that the number of people that were arresting is getting up. Yesterday, we had 227 people 227 incidents. Out of those, national, we have arrested 1,108. We would not wish to arrest so many people, but in 3 days, we arrest 1,108. Western Cape, 255 alone and all that. We'll continue to do that, to nudge them towards the compliance, but it will be better if people are listening and people are complaining without pushing it. But we will push them when the need comes.
Distancing here, because all of these tents, there's about 13 people who are sleeping in there. Yes. So the risk of people getting the virus, it's very high.
As you can see, there's a child here. We've been telling all the kids to go back because of this thing. It's a serious matter.
We're smoking drugs. They just brought us from straight, they brought us here. They promised to give us medications and stuff. Like yesterday, there was someone there vomiting blood, vomiting like he can't even breathe. They promised to take care of us. Now it's been 3 days to 4 days. They haven't done that.
When there is lockdown, it means some people will not be able to have enough water to support their family, because water is needed at almost different times of the day.
And these are the issues that we're talking about, the plight of people who don't have immediate access. And let's bring back into the conversation from the Socio-Economic Rights Institute, Siri Nomzamo Zondo. She's usually in studio with us, but at this time calls for that distance. Nomzamo, thank you once again for staying with us. Siri really is at the heart of this conversation in this month where South Africa celebrates Human Rights Month, about the rights of citizens in a disaster situation.
Well, not even that, Desiree. I think we've worked for over 10 years in trying to push government towards adopting the upgrading of informal settlements as the main way to provide development to informal settlements, which would mean access to basic services. It would mean that people over time get secure tenure. And in that time, government is involved in the planning of informal settlements. And most of that time, our cries fell on deaf ears. And we find ourselves now during COVID having government tell us that people must have access to water, that telling us that you need to have properly planned settlements, that that people are not in a dense environment. And we're like, but this is a discussion we've been trying to bring up for over 5 years. And that's just on the housing front. And I don't want to take away from the fact that no one is talking about the inner city buildings, and in Joburg specifically, which will actually live without those basic services, which will share amenities in a way that places them at much greater risk. But one of the things that we've been put on the spotlight in the last few weeks is the issue of people who are informally employed or who make their living through street trading, through waste picking, and how those people are currently so vulnerable because they are living from hand to mouth. They are part of a survivalist economy, and there hasn't been an understanding of that economy to allow government to intervene properly. So if we're talking about domestic workers, we've just been at the Constitutional Court trying to ensure they are included within the workmen's compensation. But we understand that in the million people that are in that sector, more than 90% aren't even registered for UIF, and all of them now are staying at home, but they won't have a means to feed their families. And all of these things are coming up now as things that need to be addressed immediately, because you can't simply say you'll address the virus without making sure people who are at home survive in their homes.
Nomzamo, those domestic workers you're referring to have been highlighted as some of the sector that will be most affected. Who else is in this list?
Look, I mean, it's been for us. We are part of organizations that are organized under the Public Interest Legal Services banner, and we have been receiving referrals and requests from people who are saying their employers have forced them to take unpaid leave during this time. Some of them are saying that their employers are short paying them while they're working full time. Others are complaining about how they are being forced to work when they are not really essential services. So in that moment, there's the issue of people who having to put their lives at risk for something that is not needed. But then secondly, how government in their response have not taken into account how they can protect the people that are at the bottom end of the economy. So if you look at someone like me who's employed in an NGO or someone who's employed in government, those salaries are insured. People will get their salaries come the end of next month. But all the people that are employed either as domestic workers or are employed as precarious workers or casualized in any way, those workers will not have an income. And that's why the discussion around food security is so important for this moment.
Let's bring into the conversation now Mr. Markey Maxwell Masuku. He's a social commentator. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. The address by the President earlier on reiterating the call to stay at home for the next 17 days. Your thoughts about the past 4 days of lockdown in the country?
Good evening, Desiree, and thank you for inviting me to your show. I've listened to the previous guests, and mainly, okay, we more or less are talking about the same things because we've seen how, or in fact, this crisis or this extraordinary circumstances that we find ourselves as a country in show or unmask the realities of South Africa, and it showed that we actually live in a binary society that has those who are extremely poor and those who are who are comfortable. So now the 4 days that we've seen that there are households. Even if the state did this, it looked rushed because there has not been enough provision for households that fall what we call as outliers in the South African society.
So, Maxwell, practically, what have been your thoughts about government's ability to disseminate information to the South African public about activities and what needs to be done? Is there sufficient direction and leadership being given?
Well, my thoughts are in this way. One, the vulnerabilities that we saw. One was that, you could see that we don't have an active civil society or civil society organizations that are on, that are there on the ground level where the the majority of our population lives. Hence, you saw that the solutions that were applied were rather imported from, countries or first world countries that can afford to have things like social distancing as practical. With us, we were the president announced this on the 23rd, that on the 26th we're having a lockdown. Now we're having a lockdown where the realities are that we've got special realities in South Africa that has been a legacy of our past, of course. But it showed that, then maybe the policies that the African National Congress, as the party that's leading in government, has not addressed. It showed those vulnerabilities now came to the fore. So it is there where you saw that, then we have so much that has not been addressed in the past 25 years. For example, when this was announced, you find that, okay, you have a disaster, because it's governed by the Disaster Management Act, because, this is what was, diverted, and that brought this state of disaster into action, or the lockdown, rather, is administered by that act. So now, what we saw there is that, okay, there is a Disaster Management Act, but within the Disaster Management Act, not enough provisions were done to say, okay, if we face a situation like this, how do we then give protection or the safety net for households and individuals, knowing that, okay, our society has got all these inequalities, your unemployment staying at 30%. All these things were not adequately addressed. However, I would like to say that, okay, yes, I am aware of saying all these things, that this is an extraordinary moment for South Africa. None of us has ever experienced this, even during the height of apartheid itself, where everyone has had to be under a lockdown. But then at the same time, I would say, okay, I would have, if we came to a situation like this and I was leading, I would have then looked at rather regional lockdowns instead of this national or nationwide lockdown as it was carried out in the first stage.
Markey Maxwell Masuku is a social commentator. We're also in conversation with Nomzamo who is from Nomzamo Zondo, who is from the Socio-Economic Rights Institute, SIRI. Let's take a break. You're watching Unfiltered. We'll be back in a moment.
In some of the congested areas, they are unable to follow the rules in terms of social distancing. But in areas like this, you see that they are able to ensure that they are in a distance from the next person. Now, this is what we will encourage, and we are communicating through our MECs.
It's a mixture of services as well, where people want to buy some of the products. And the issue of social distancing still remains a huge challenge.
Most of the people that are staying at home because of that, they are afraid to come and contract the virus through this process of paying out, because there are a number of people who are here, so some of them, they are afraid to come and get contact with other people.
National Department of Health and the whole strategy must be looked at to enforce isolation in the 14 days of self-quarantine, to ensure that self-quarantine indeed it's real and it has strict measures to ensure that people don't move around transmitting others, yet they know.
All right, we're taking a look at some social media contributions tonight. Kwenani, TME saying, Desiree, I stay in Kwakwa in Putadichaba. Jojo Tanks, Lindiwe Sisulu is talking about, comes once a week. How are we supposed to wash our hands every now and then? ANC takes people for granted. We're only good for them when they need our votes. Also, Rapudi Juana, is it Juana or Juana? But there's a K in there, so it's Rapudi Juana, saying, if anything, we should get out of this lockdown SA with great lessons grasped as individuals going forward. 21 reasons saying the lockdown SA is boring, yes, but we have to admire how much money is helping us. It's helping us save. Oh, that's fantastic. I suspect 21 Reasons doesn't have kids. Fikile Mabaso saying, I can't cope. I'm sick in town. I can't go to my children. They're running out of food. I don't have transport. These are some of the social issues that have been coming through from this. Disetso Ramaele saying, we're trying, but living with teenagers, you have to be monitored 247 around the clock. It isn't easy. You must, 24/7 around the clock. It isn't easy. You just pray and wish for the pandemic to disappear permanently. So lockdown should be uplifted. I think that's a collective wish from all of us, but thank you so much for that contribution. Let's bring back our guests tonight. We have Nomza Mozondo, who's the Executive Director of Socio-Economic Rights Institute, SIRI, as well as social commentator Maxwell Masuku. Nomza, let's start with you again. We've been talking to Maxwell Masuku. I don't know if you've been listening to that conversation, decrying the fact that civic society is not that visible. Do you agree with him?
I totally disagree with him. There is currently the People's Project on COVID-19, and that has been quite vocal, firstly, but also has taken some action to ensure that people who are vulnerable in society have access to basic services, and people have pulled together the low resources that they have to try and see how they can meet our government halfway, but also making sure that the spotlight is on the most vulnerable in our society. I think, unfortunately, as I've been saying before, the lockdown keeps everyone in their homes. But you see in many of the communities, many of the informal settlements, the activists are out doing data collection, making sure they know where their childhood households and how those families are going to be supported during this time.
Have members of civic society not been given permission in terms of essential services?
No, they have not. So the issue is that you are in essential service, but we've seen how our police have been reacting. Unless you have a permit that allows you to be out and about, you are at risk. I'm sure you also saw how the media who have permits have been at risk. So part of the engagement in the last few days has been about how is civil society going to be, firstly, people are going to ensure they are safe.
Absolutely.
When they're working in their communities. We've had activists tell us, the police have told them that we know you're activists, we know you want to assist, but if we see you on the street without this permit, you will get arrested.
Really?
Yes.
So how are they supposed to carry out their work, their very essential work?
So, so the call has been for the relevant government departments to issue permits for people who are trying to assist in the issue of access to basic services, people who are trying to ensure there's food security, people who are doing some of the work of healthcare workers. But I have not seen it actually come into that. I haven't seen anyone being given that permission from the State Department.
Mr. Masuku, the President saying today that the downgrade by Moody's, the downgrade of South Africa's economy. Let's just take a listen to what the President had to say earlier.
My fellow South Africans, we are now entering a new phase in the fight against the coronavirus pandemic. In the coming days, government will be rolling out a screening, testing, tracing and medical management program on a huge scale. Around 10,000 field workers at the moment will be visiting homes in villages, in towns and cities to screen residents for the coronavirus symptoms.
As part of that address, the minister saying that the Moody's downgrade will significantly affect government's ability to secure goods and services required in the fight against COVID-19. Your thoughts here, Mr. Masuku?
My thoughts are actually that our government, we had not been a graded investment destination before 2001. And before then, you had a government that was, before 1994, you had a government that was serious about its national interests. Now, at the moment, we are in extraordinary, even before the COVID-19 crisis, we were having extraordinary circumstances where you had, the unemployment that's been hovering around 25 up to 30% since the ANC has been in power since 1994. And you've had stubborn inequality and poverty. Those are extraordinary circumstances. Now, to always now want to be to run outside of the country whilst we have so many resources within our country, trillions of rands in both mineral resources, not just mineral resources, but you have trillions of rands in savings that can be exploited for this purposes. Why are we always going about asking for money outside the country?
Ms. Zondo, let me bring you in here for your closing comments. As somebody who's concerned about society, how do you respond to that announcement by the President in announcing that the Motsepe Foundation, Naspers, Jack Ma, and the other contributors to funds into the fight, but also saying that the Moody's downgrade will significantly affect government's ability to secure goods and services in this fight?
Look, I think it is a concern that Moody decided to downgrade us at this point in time, knowing that the whole world is fighting against the COVID virus. But I think we have to concentrate on keeping the economy alive here, and that means that we have to use the resources that we have to make sure that those who are workers have paid leave or at least have access to the UIF. That if we cannot do that, we ensure that there is some sort of a special COVID grant or the basic income grant to make sure that people survive through this crisis. And I think that we might be surprised that at the end of the crisis, Moody's might change their mind. Okay,
I'm going to have to ask you to hold it there because we have time constraints, but thank you so much for your contribution tonight. The Minister of Human Settlements and Water and Sanitation, Minister Lindiwe Sisulu, Nomzamo Zondo from Siri, as well as Markey, Maxwell, Masuku, and clinical psychologist Desi Tsaneva. Thank you so much for your contribution tonight. 17 days to go in terms of the nationwide lockdown. We asked you a question, how are you managing and coping with the lockdown? 45.1% of you saying we're fine handling it, 20.5% saying not fine, not used to it, and 34.4% saying still adjusting. Thank you so much for your contributions tonight, South Africa. Join us again next week, Monday, when we bring you more here on Unfiltered.